I'm the youth minister here. My name's Tripp Durden. And there's two kinds of youth ministers. There's a youth minister who's really good at lessons, and there's a youth minister who's really good at relationships. I'm the latter. So if you don't like this lesson, blame it on Joey when he gets back. I'm about to graduate from college, Point University. It used to be Atlanta Christian College. And as I got closer to graduation, people always ask me, what are you doing after graduation? And so I tell them, well, I've already got a job in Rome as a youth minister. And they always ask one or two questions. They always say, Rome, Italy? And I have to say, no, Rome, Georgia. And then they say, are you from Rome? And I always say, no, I'm from Dallas, and kind of go and explaining how I ended up in Rome. And there's a really funny story that goes along with how I ended up in Rome. A couple summers ago, when I first became an intern at Oak Hill, I came to the church for a meeting. And I was meeting with Brian Doherty, and I was meeting with Joey, and I'd never met Joey before. And so, not knowing what to expect coming in, I get there, and Bird says, well, yeah, he said, you're going to meet Joey today. He said, but I gotta warn you before we get in there. And I said, okay, what's the deal? He said, well, our preacher, he's pretty young for a preacher, he said, but in the last about 2 years, he had a condition called early onset blindness. I'm still kind of looking like, I don't know what you're talking about, what's going on. And he said, yeah, he said, it's really weird. He said, but in the last 2 years, he's slowly started to go blind, and he's lost all sight at this point. He can't see anything. All right. So Bird said, so when we get in there, he said, he's not going to look directly at you. He said, he's going to be looking off. He said, it's kind of awkward. He said, but don't look directly at him because he can tell when you're looking at him. And he said, he'll call you out about it. So I'm freaking out. This is my first intern job. I've never met this guy, and now I've got to go in this awkward meeting where he's going to ask me a bunch of questions, make me sign a pledge that I won't do certain things over the summer. I'm really nervous. So I'm expecting this guy to be blind, so we go in. And I get in there, and Joey's kind of looking off in the corner. Not looking at anything, just looking in the corner. We walk in, and Bird says, Joey? Joey turns like this, yeah? He's like looking up. And he says, Tripp's here to meet you. He said, he's here for his entrance meeting. And Joey said, okay, good. Joey stands up, and he starts to feel his way across the room. So he gets over to us, and he said, Tripp, I can't see. He said, I'm going to stick out my hand. You just put your hand wherever my hand is so we can shake hands. So he sticks his hand out, and I grab him, and I shake it. And so we start having a conversation. And the whole time, Joey's not looking at me. He's looking off. And he said, well, where do you go to school? And what do you like to do? And how old are you? And this kind of thing. So I'm thinking, this is going pretty good. It's not awkward at all. This guy's pretty normal. I'm not staring at him. It's going to be okay. So we have our meeting. And Joey says he's glad I'm there. And I leave, and me and Bird go to lunch, and Bird says, you did good, man, you did real good, whatever. Sorry, I missed the part. So right before we walk out, Joey says, well, it's good to meet you. He said, but I'm kind of interested in what you look like. And I said, all right. He said, I can't see you. He said, so can I feel your face? So I can get an idea of what you look like? And I'm thinking, sure, why not? I mean, that's no big deal. So I kid you not. Come here, Cameron. Joey walks up to me, and he does this right here. And he says, oh, you got a little bit of a beard coming in? He said, good, strong jawline. And he says, all right, man, good to meet you. I figure that's how blind people act. I didn't think anything about it. So I'll walk out, and Barry says, you did a good job, whatever. Later on, we get back to Oak Hill, and we're sitting in the office, and I've met some of the office staff and that sort of thing. And Joey comes walking out. And he walks right up to me, and he's looking directly at me. And in my head, I'm going, something's not right. And he sticks out his hand, and he says, hey man, I'm excited about the summer, but I'm not blind. They caught the whole thing on video. And Joey looked for it for me, and he can't find the video anywhere, but I'm a little bit glad that I can't find that video. So I expected Joey to be blind. And based on those expectations, I went into that meeting thinking, this guy can't see me. I don't need to look at him. Everything about how I acted in that meeting, letting him feel my face, all of that stuff, was based on my expectation that he was blind. We always act based on our expectations, right? So maybe you expect your team to win. I'm a huge Georgia Bulldogs fan. I thought they would beat the Florida Gators this year. So the whole time up, I'm talking trash and telling all the people that I know that are Florida Gators fans, Georgia's going to win. And then they lose, and I look silly. Sometimes we expect to have money in the bank because we know we get a check every week. But maybe your work misses that check and you spent a lot of money last week thinking you were going to have it in the bank, and now you're left high and dry. Sometimes you expect things to go smoothly. You leave on a car trip and you get a flat tire. And you had planned everything else. You left right on time, but now you're going to be late because you didn't expect a flat tire. You expected to get there smooth and safe and sound. The way our expectations affect how we act on a daily basis. The problem is that these expectations can get us in a lot of trouble, particularly in spiritual matters. I want to read you guys the story that the verse came from earlier this morning. Jesus continued, "There was a man who had 2 sons, and the young one said to his father, 'Father, give me my share of the estate.' So he divided his property between them. Not long after that, the younger son got together all he had, set off for a distant country, and there squandered his wealth in wild living. After he had spent everything, there was a severe famine in that whole country, and he began to be in need. So he went and hired himself out to a citizen of that country, who sent him to his fields to feed the pigs. He longed to fill his stomach with the pods that the pigs were eating, but no one gave him anything. When he came to his senses, he said, 'How many of my father's hired servants have food to spare, and here I am starving to death? I will set out and go back to my father and say to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Make me like one of your hired servants.' So he got up and went to his father. But while he was still a long way off, his father saw him and was filled with compassion for him. He ran to his son, threw his arms around him and kissed him. The son said to him, 'Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son.' But the father said to his servants, 'Quick, bring the best robe and put it on him. Put a ring on his finger, sandals on his feet. Bring the fattened calf and kill it. Let's have a feast and celebrate. For this son of mine was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found.' So they began to celebrate. Meanwhile, the older son was in the field. When he came near the house, he heard music and dancing. So he called one of the servants and asked him what was going on. 'Your brother has come,' he replied, 'and your father has killed the fattened calf because he has him back safe and sound.' The older brother became angry and refused to go in. So his father went out and pleaded with him. But he answered his father, 'Look, all these years I've been slaving for you and never disobeyed your orders. Yet you never gave me even a young goat so I could celebrate with my friends. But when this son of yours, who has squandered your property with prostitutes, comes home, you kill the fattened calf for him.' 'My son,' the father said, 'you are always with me, and everything I have is yours. But we had to celebrate and be glad because this brother of yours was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found.'" In this story, we can see 3 ways that people's expectations failed them. We see it in the interactions between the sons and the father. The first instance of failed expectations is found in the expectations that the younger son has of himself. This younger son has had it pretty good. He's got a dad who provides for him. He's got an older brother who works with him. And he wakes up one day and he thinks, "I can do this on my own. I don't need my father. I don't need my brother. I'll take my money and I'll go off to another country and I'll make my own way and I'll live the way I want to." And I think a lot of the times in our head, we think the younger son planned to go out and spend everything he had and then come back to the dad. We act as if his plan the whole time was to go out and to drink all the time and to waste his money on prostitutes, like the scripture says, and to just blow everything that he had and then come back in shame. I don't think it's like that. I think the son expected himself to succeed. I think he thought, I'll go to this country and I'll get a job and I'll start saving some money and I'll build me a house and I'll get me some servants and I'll have me a couple sons. And I won't need my dad for that. I won't need his help. I can do it on my own. And this is how we are a lot of the time. We expect ourselves to do it on our own. We don't think that we need our friends or our family. We don't think we need God to tell us what to do. We think we can make it without all of that stuff. We run from community thinking, I think this all the time. I'm a grown man. I can do it on my own. All the time I think to myself, I've been out of the house for how long now? I've been paying rent for how long now? And the sad thing is that a lot of the times I have to be told no, and that's wrong. When I was in Montana this summer, before I came home, my Jeep started running a little funny. Just started knocking, and my dad's always been big on checking on your cars and changing the oil and everything. So as soon as it started knocking, I knew, I've got to go get this checked. I'm driving 2,000 miles in a couple of days. Gotta go get it done. So I talked to my boss in Montana, and he had a friend who owned a car dealership, and the guy said, yeah, I'll bring it into my garage and check on it, and we'll do it for a good price, whatever. So I call my dad and I say, hey, this guy says he's gonna give me a good price. I'll take it over there, I'll get it looked at. But I said, all right. He said, but I'm just warning you that that guy's gonna try to take advantage of you because he knows you have to drive 2,000 miles in a few days, that you don't have a choice, and he knows whatever he charges you for the Jeep, you'll pay. So I'm listening and I'm thinking, oh my gosh, Dad, I've got this figured out. The guy, I know the guy, he's friends with my boss. He already told my boss he'd give me a good price. It's okay. My dad's saying, all right, well, it's your money. You do what you want with it, but I'm just warning you. So I get off the phone and I don't think anything about it. I go over there and the guy checks on my Jeep and he tells me what's wrong. He says, I'll fix it. And he says, we'll do it for $400. I'm thinking, that's good. I can pay that. That's fine. So I leave my Jeep there, and a couple days later, the guy's still not done with it. And on the day that I go up there, and I've got a couple of my students with me, and we go into his office, and he says, okay, this is what's wrong with your Jeep. And he tells me that they were pulling around, and the wind blew the hood up, and it dented it a little bit. And so I look at the hood, and I say, it's not that big a deal. Just knock like $150, $200 off the price, and we'll call it even. Thinking, now I'm paying $200. This is a good deal. So we get in, and he passes the bill across the desk, and it says $950. So I said, dude, you told me $400. And he said, yeah. He said, but it took longer than we expected. There were more problems than we thought. He said, I knew you had to get home in a few days. He said, so we just went ahead and did the work. He said, I didn't want to call you and ask because, he said, I knew you had to go home. I was furious. And I said, man, you just told me you dented my hood. That's a $1,500 hood. And I just said, knock a few $100 off and it'd be fine. And he said, well, he said, well, I'll knock more than that off. And I said, no, I want to hold up my end of the deal, what I said I would do. You knock a couple $100 off. So I ended up paying $750 for what he said would be $400. As soon as I get in the car, all I can hear is what my dad was saying. Son, he's going to try to take advantage of you. I thought that I could make this decision. I thought that I was well equipped to do something like this. When I know my dad has 30 years experience in the automotive industry. He's painted cars for a living. He's worked in body shops. He's worked at dealerships. He knows what's going to happen. And regardless of that, I said, I can do it. It's fine. That's what the son thought. And a lot of the times when we fail, that's where we stop. When we come to that point, we realize I can't do this on my own. I can't make it without help. I can't make it without community. I can't make it without God. We stop there and we think that's the end. But that's not what the younger son does. The younger son comes to that point, and the scripture says, when he came to his senses. When he came to his senses, he said, even my father's servants have food to eat. And so he goes back to his father. We need to be like the younger son and realize when our expectations are wrong and not expect ourselves to have it all together, and not expect ourselves to not fall, and be willing to go back when that time comes. Your failure is not the end. It's not a confirmation that you were a mistake. It's not you looking in the mirror and realizing that you're a loss. It's an invitation to come back home. I'm going to read Luke 15, 17 through 24. This is the next interaction where we see failed expectations come through. When he came to his senses, he said, how many of my father's hired servants have food to spare, and here I am starving to death? I will set out and go back to my father, and I will say to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Make me like one of your hired servants. So he got up and went to his father. The son has an expectation that when he goes back to his dad's going to be waiting on him. And his dad's going to be standing back and he's going to say, I told you so. You didn't listen to me, did you? I tried to tell you that you were wrong. I tried to tell you you didn't have it all together. And what'd you do? You go running out and waste all my money and waste all your time and all your energy instead of just listening to me from the beginning. The son expects his father to act this way. And I know that I expected my dad to act that way too. When I got home from that dealership in Montana, when I got back to where I was staying for the summer, I called my mom and I said, Mom, I said, Dad was right. I said, that guy cheated me out of some money. And she said, have you called your dad? And I said, no, I'm not calling him. I said, I'm not even going to tell him. I said, I'm going to pay it, and that's going to be the end of it. I'm not dealing with it. She said, son, you need to call your dad. And I said, well, I kind of already did talk to him. She said, what did he say? I said, I lied. She said, what do you mean you lied? I said, I told him that I paid $400. I said, I told him that I paid the guy what I said I would pay him. And so he thinks that the guy didn't cheat me. And Mom says, son, you got to call him. So after about 6 hours of fretting and hurting and thinking, I called my dad. I guess it was about 9:30, 10 o'clock in Montana, so it's about midnight back in Georgia. I called my dad, and he picks up the phone, and he's at the fire station, and he says, hello? And I said, hey, Daddy. He said, what's going on? He said, you sound like you're upset. And I said, I am, and I started to cry a little bit. And he said, what's wrong? And I said, I lied to you. I said, that guy cheated me out of money. I said, I paid almost $800 when he said I'd only pay $400. And I thought my dad would say, why didn't you just listen to me? Why did you not know that you couldn't do it on your own? You've been around me your whole life. You know that I know more than you. You know that I know what I'm talking about in this area. And still, you wanted to be prideful, and you wanted to stand on your own, and you wanted to act like you knew what was best for you. I thought my dad would act that way. And so what happens? The son, he decides to come home, and he's walking up, and he can see the gates, and he sees a guy standing out by the gates. And next thing he knows, that guy's not standing there anymore. He's running out to me. And I wonder at what point of the guy running back did the son realize that it was his father coming to meet him. And I wonder how that made the son feel. I don't have to wonder how he felt. When I talked to my dad that day, and he said, and I told him, I said, this guy cheated me out of money like you said it would, and I lied to you. My dad said, it happened. And he said, and even though you lost money on it, he said, I'm proud that you tried to take initiative to do something and didn't wait for me to make the decision for you. That you tried to stand out on your own, even though I knew you would fall. And he said, the lessons you've learned from doing this far outweigh what would have the benefits of listening to me. He said, that $400, he said, means nothing compared to the lessons you've learned because of what you tried to do. The younger son came to his senses and came back to his father. I came to my senses and went back to my father. At what point, when we think we can do it on our own, do we come to our senses and come back to God? When do we realize that we can't do it without Him and come back to Him? And I know what's holding us back. You're afraid of what He'll say. You think, I've gone too far this time. I've spent too much time on my own. I don't know what to say. I don't know what to do. I don't know how to come back to Him. But if you'll turn around and start coming back, you'll find out that He's coming to meet you. He's meeting you. Right before the parable of the lost son, Jesus tells a story about a lost sheep, and I want to read that story to you guys. Suppose one of you has 100 sheep and loses one of them. Doesn't he leave the 99 in the open country and go after the lost sheep until he finds it? And when he finds it, he joyfully puts it on his shoulder and goes home. He calls his friends and neighbors and says, rejoice with me, for I have found my lost sheep. I tell you that in the same way, there will be more rejoicing in heaven over one sinner who repents than over 99 righteous persons who do not need to repent. God's anger at what you're doing is minimal compared to His joy when you decide to return home. Amen. The last way that we can see expectations fail, those involved in this story, is in the interaction of the older son and his father. So in the story we're told that the young son comes back and the dad throws a party. And the older son hears about it and is really upset that his dad would do something like this. And sometimes I think that the same way that we thought the younger son meant to go out and waste all his money. We think the older son is just a selfish jerk. We look at him and we think, how could anyone feel that way? How could they act that way? Once again, I can see myself in this story completely. See, I have a little brother named Zach. He's about 2 years younger than me. And our whole life, me and Zach have been polar opposites. We dress different. We act different. My brother's a class clown. He's always joking. He never knows when to quit. And I'm the opposite. Except when I'm with youth group kids, I'm kind of reserved. I don't talk very much. I kind of just do my own thing. My whole life, I've been the good kid. I've been the one who didn't get in trouble at school. I've been the one who said yes sir and no sir and yes ma'am and no ma'am. I'm the one who woke up the first time Dad told us to get up and didn't lay around in bed waiting on him to come get us. Except that Zach never got in trouble for those things. He would do those things and my mom would just let him off and not say anything to him. I would do them and she would freak out. She would jump all over me saying, Tripp, you know better than this. Why are you doing this? I've taught you better than this. And I'm sitting here thinking, Zach is over there throwing a temper tantrum. I did one thing and you're freaking out at me. So one day I decided it's not happening anymore. I'm calling him out about it. And if any of you have ever met my dad, you guys know that didn't go over well. So one day something happens and I finally said something about it. I said, you guys treat Zach different. Y'all like him better. He's the favorite child. I decided to put my foot down. This ends today. And it didn't go very well. My parents, more than angry, my parents were hurt that I would think something like that. That I would actually feel like they cared about my brother more than they cared about me. My parents explained to me that me and my brother were different people. That the parenting style that works with me will never work with Zach. Because he just doesn't operate that way. And they explained to me why the differences were there. I'm not sure that this is the case. One second, I'll look at this. When I read the story of the prodigal son, I see myself in the younger brother, but I see myself more in the older brother. It seems to me that the older son watched his younger brother get off easy for years. Maybe the dad expected more of the older son simply because he was the older son. That was often the case in my life. Maybe he thinks that the father truly prefers the younger brother. I'm not sure, but let's say for a second that this is the case. Can you imagine how he felt when he woke up one morning and his younger brother was gone? And he was the only one there to work in the fields. He thought, this time, Dad's going to see. This time, there's no denying it. Zach, or whatever the younger brother's name was, left home. He's acting crazy, acting wild. And who's staying? Who's doing what they're supposed to? Who's out working in the fields sweating? Who's not asking for their money early? Who's putting in the time and effort? Who says yes sir and no sir? Me. I'm doing those things. And he thinks there's no way that Dad can see it any other way. And he's setting up expectations about how his dad feels and what he thinks and what's going to happen when the younger brother comes back. He saw it as his chance to prove himself to his father, to show that he was the more mature son, the more dedicated son, the better son. And when and if his brother comes back, he expects his father will really stick it to him this time. He feels there is only one way to see the situation, and that's his way. His anger at the father is less about his selfishness, and even less about his brother. His real anger is because he thought for once him and his father would see eye to eye. His anger is from his failed expectations. This is so much like myself that it actually hurts to think about it. Is it like you? Do you set people up to where they can't fail you? Do you build a pedestal up and you put somebody on it, and when they fall, it feels personal? It feels like they did it just to hurt you. It feels like they did it out of anger at you. It feels like an attack. It feels like the world has ended. When I was at Burnt Hickory, there was a youth minister there named John David Partain. That's who I went to Montana with to work this summer. Other than my dad, I'm not sure that there's another man who's affected me in the way that JD has. He taught me stuff about the Bible and about Christianity and about relationships and about community that I hadn't learned anywhere else. And I know that I'm not the only person from Burnt Hickory that feels that way. One Sunday we got to church and JD told us he was going back to Montana. He wasn't going to be our youth minister anymore. And I promise you, from that Sunday to the next Sunday, the youth group was cut in half. And then a Sunday later, that was cut in half. Kids were leaving because to them, JD represented what Christianity was. To them, he could do no wrong. He was going to be there forever. Even if everyone else left, they knew that JD was going to be there and he was going to be doing fun stuff and awesome mission trips. And that if they were struggling with drinking or partying or anything else, that even if they couldn't talk to their parents, JD would be there and they could come to him. And they built this pedestal so high that when JD fell off, they fell off with him. And they didn't know how to get back. And a lot of those kids are still not in church today. Some of them don't believe anymore. And it all goes back to they had this one guy that they put up so high that it was impossible to reach without him. They made JD their faith. They made JD their salvation. And just as an aside here to the youth group, please do not ever make me that guy. Please. Because I promise you, I can't meet your expectations that way. I can't. But we've all done that, right? Maybe it's your dad, like in the story. You think that he's got it all together, and so when you find out that he struggles too, you find out maybe about something from his past that was a mistake. Maybe it's a professor you were close to in college or in high school, and you find out that in the classroom this person looks this way, but at home they've got a bad family life, and they don't even treat their own kids as good as they treat me. People fail those expectations, and we don't know what to do anymore. It is extremely dangerous to put people on a pedestal of this sort, because at the end of the day, we're all human. We're all going to fail. We all fall short of the glory of God, much less everyone else's expectations. If we can make that our benchmark, if we can make that the pedestal that we expect people to be good people, but every once in a while they're going to fail, we'll be much better off. If we can understand that in the same way that I can't stand on my own and I can't make it without other people, they can't make it without other people either, and they can't stand on their own, and they're going to fail in the same way that I fail, we'll be much happier. That will allow us to be more open with them and then be more open with us, have a realistic conversation about what it means to be trying to pursue God. Perfection is not there. Not for you, and not for me, and not for anyone else who happens to be a human being. It's just not. And when we put people up on those pedestals, they're going to fail us, and they're going to fall, and it's not going to feel good. Our expectations of other people and ourselves have to be leveled off of that single idea that every man, woman, and child on earth will eventually fall. This is a hard thing to come to grips with, isn't it? That our expectations a lot of time are misplaced, are too lofty, are unrealistic. The way we view ourselves, the way we view others, and the way we view God can be extremely unhealthy. But luckily, when we abandon these expectations and decide to go for a more realistic and more true version of events, things get much better. When we come to grips with the fact that we do not have to be perfect, we can be more open and honest and true with God. When we reconcile ourselves with the fact that God is not an angry, prideful parent looking to rub our defeat in our faces, but is instead a loving Father running to meet us, we can become closer to Him, and we are no longer afraid to come to Him with our problems. When we realize that other people like ourselves are bound to fall at some point, we can avoid putting them up on those pedestals too high to maintain, and in turn extend them the same grace and love that we have been extended. Have your expectations been misplaced as of late? Have you been too hard on yourself, afraid to return to God, or too critical of others lately? If you struggle with any of these things, or you need anything else from us as a church, please come together as we stand and sing.